everybody. This is Lady Red of the Black Pants Legion, and if I've done things properly, you guys should be able to hear me at this point, and oh god, Pupcam's died. This is the worst possible thing. Give me just a moment. Pupcam's died. There we go. Pupcam is fixed. OBS just needed to have a moment. No audio. Oh no. Oh no. How possibly are you able to talk to me with no audio? How are we doing this afternoon, chat? Do we have audio coming in through the wrong places?
Bully is saying...
Yeah, love, Doc's joking. He couldn't answer my question if he couldn't hear me. So...
I'm also sleep deprived.
I have an Aiden with me who you guys can't hear just yet, so I'm going to bring him in now. Would you like to say hi?
Hi.
Aiden.
Also, a bit of troubleshooting for PupCam because it's gone down again. I think you need to have the window for PupCam, up.
Yeah, for some reason it won't let me have it behind other things, which is really annoying. Can I pin you on top so that you just behave yourself? We've had to change PupCam around a little bit because the webcam is no longer plugged in to my computer. It is now plugged into Aiden's computer because we've given them a bigger play space and his computer is closer. At the moment, we've got Dad in there with the babies. He's been teaching them to play now that Ceres will actually allow him to be near them. And he has been just the best dad. He has been doing so well.
I'm about to have to let him out, though, because he's gonna jump over the camera if I don't, because Mother is requesting out.
Okay.
So I will return.
Well, if you want to go and take the dogs out, I'll let chat know what nonsense I'm getting up to this week. Yeah, Pupcam will go dark for just a moment so that we don't do any accidental face reveals, but it will come back up in a second. So, yeah, this week they haven't left me all on my own to just get up to shenanigans solo. I have, in fact, stolen Aiden once again, and I figured I might talk to you guys about something a bit strange this week, something that's sort of uniquely British, and part of that is because I've been blessed to be drawing something fantasy-based this week. I've been doing some work for our lovely Mayor of the Orcs, Vendrep. Just finished his piece today and he's happy with it, and it's got me in a fantasy mood, so I wanted to talk about something that I grew up with that I'm going to guess that probably nobody here has heard of. It is a setting called Enchantica. Has anybody ever heard of it? I'm really glad the help was of worth to you, Doctor Who. That's great. I'm really, really glad to know that my whimsical approach to writing can sometimes be useful. Who do you see for your privateer license and cost and casualty reports? I'm probably going to direct you to Kai for that. You can go and annoy him. You do hear puppy yelps. The babies are very, very upset that their playmate has left the area to go and pee outside. How dare we? So they are currently crying their tiny little hearts out because they've been left all alone and they've never had any love a single day in their tiny lives, you know. Never, ever, ever at all. They are also the reason that Aiden and I are sleep deprived, because Ceres decided at 5 o'clock this morning, out of the blue, that she needed to make sure they were okay. And she woke them up at 5 o'clock in the morning. We went to bed at midnight. So, yes, they do in fact have a pup set. They are very pup set. No, it is not ambient seagulls for the water planet. That is the sound of tiny, distressed beagles who haven't figured out they can howl yet. Oh, one of them stalking. That is Lupa stalking Virgil. Oh no, she's just given up now. Lupa is very dog-oriented. She loves to play with the other dogs, and she has learnt the fine art of bouncing and pouncing. So she thinks she's part Tigger. Virgil and Anka, Anka's the little one that we're keeping, are both just massive cuddle bugs. And Virgil and his dad yesterday, I wish I'd recorded it, but I was outside and didn't have my phone with me. They were talking to each other underneath the door jamb while they were outside, and it was just precious. Yeah, once they learn to bay, I don't know what we're going to do. It's going to be so noisy in this house.
They already
They haven't learnt their full howls yet, mostly because they're tiny.
They certainly were giving it a good try this morning.
All right, Aiden will be back with us in a moment, and I can then tell you guys about the nonsense. We can also talk briefly about what I'm planning to do this week. I want to talk about Enchantica with you guys first, because it's something I grew up with and has definitely been influential on my interest in writing, in fantasy, in character creation, in the myriad ways that creativity happens with human beings. Then I'd also like to show you a really cool thing that Ninja got to me today. I mentioned last week, for those of you that were here, that Ninja Turtle, who streams on Sundays and does racing, did the most nerdy thing possible that's also the coolest thing possible, and he went and made a working model of Shoal's solar system and Shoal in orbit around its gas giant. And he's done me a 3-minute video looking at the simulation that he put together, and I'm going to be able to show that to you guys today because it's really, really, really cool.
Okay.
Hi, welcome
back.
back. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Good, good, good. So once we've done that, I think then what we should do is have a look at the land ecosystem on Shoal this week. Maybe also talk about our freshwater critters, because I have to put my hands up. I was really hoping last weekend to spend time writing up everything we did last week and updating the PDF that's available in the Orcs for you guys to see. I just did not have time between the puppies, artwork that was owed, some commercial stuff that I was asked to do on a time frame. I just didn't have time. I have started it, and you can see some of that right up on the right. I didn't just go, no, we're done, I've forgotten. I just didn't have time. So I'd like to move to looking at the land and the freshwater this week, maybe look at some leviathans that we might want to put together, and then by next week, all of that should be written up for us to finish the creature generation. And yes, Sarah gets swarmed by her babies. They are little tiny land piranha who will not let her stand on all 4 legs anymore.
Yep, she is having to tripod her way around.
This morning, once I got up and Aiden went to get a few more hours of sleep, they backed her into a corner and she was stood with both of her rear paws up on the wall like she was doing a handstand, and it was the most ridiculous and cute thing. So yes, poor Sarah. She's doing her best, bless her. She actually plays with the babies now as well. She'll play bow to them and get them involved in playing so they'll stop bothering her for milk all the time.
When they're not latched onto her.
All right, so I said we were going to talk about some new weird thing that none of you have ever heard of. So we're going to do that. So when I was a wee tiny redling, still living in the UK with my mum is also a creative type, and probably a very big reason why I'm into all of the creative arts that I love so much. She started reading to me when I was still just a bump. So I've always been interested in creative things, so has she, and a lot of her interests informed my early interests, and of course have then gone on to inform my adult interests. And one of the things that my mum was really into was a setting called Enchantica. And this was a setting where she has all 4 of the books. She has a lot of the figures that go with it. And she also got me the audiobooks when I was very young, and they were one of my sort of comfort things to listen to. Because when I was a naughty little tiny redling, grounding me didn't really work, but that was fine. That was how my mum parented. Because if you told me you've been naughty, go to your room, that wasn't a punishment, because my room was full of books, it was full of colouring sheets, it was full of all kinds of calm activities I could do on my own, which was really what my mum wanted when I was naughty, which was just stop being naughty, go and do something productive, calm yourself down, and then I'll come up and see you in like 45 minutes and we'll pretend nothing ever happened because we're fine now. You're no longer bouncing off the walls because you've had too much soda to drink. And I'd listen to the audiobooks when I was grumpy. So they're very sort of ingrained in my mentality at this point. And Enchantica, as I got older and started to understand what the setting was, where it came from, and why it was in the format that it was in, is because it has a really weird history of how this setting came to be. So, I'm going to flash up on screen something that came on the back of every single figure box for the resin statuettes you could get from Enchantica. This is a sort of thing that was written on, and as you'll see from this, we're back in the 1980s at the moment. This setting was first envisioned in 1986. So we're going back in time quite a long way, and it's a very 1980s logo, and it was a very sort of 1980s concept that I don't think would happen today because of what we have available to cover the issues that Andrew Bill and the studio that he was working for were facing. So this was a little thing that was written on the back of every single box, and it gives you what the overview. Enchantica is a high fantasy setting, and it's not horrendously deep. That's not to say it's a shallow and childish setting, but it's not a grand sweeping setting that's as deep as some. And it exists effectively purely so that resin statues and painted figures could be made for it and sold. And that's where the genesis of Enchantica starts. Now, I've spoken about in previous weeks the importance of limitations for creativity, because if you give somebody every single freedom under the sun and say, make something, that can be very overwhelming. But when you've got some limitations in place, that can spawn creativity that might not have happened otherwise, whether you do that by limiting color palettes, whether you limit the subject matter, the style, or in the case of Enchantica, it only exists because of IP law. It is a seriously AD&D font, yes. And I mean, it's the same time period we're looking at here. So that's hardly surprising. So Enchantica exists because Lord of the Rings is not available for just anybody to use willy-nilly. It belongs to the Tolkien estate. And in 1986, it also belonged to an American movie studio. I cannot remember which one. I didn't bother going to look it up, but back in the 80s, the rights to Lord of the Rings was owned by an American movie studio. And the guys behind Enchantica were in Staffordshire in England, and they were a little tiny resin statue studio. They made little mice statues. They were working on various different projects, and they were looking to make something more meaningful. And what they ideally wanted to do, because this was the era of advanced Dungeons and Dragons, what they really wanted to do was to make some figures for Lord of the Rings, because at the time, they didn't exist. Nobody was making collectible figurines that you could display on your mantelpiece, which is, still a big thing in the UK, collecting in that sort of way. That didn't exist. But with an American movie studio owning the rights, it would have been completely cost prohibitive to try and do this. So they had all these cool ideas. They wanted to do wizards, they wanted to do dragons, they wanted to do dwarves and elves and all these fantastical creatures, but they didn't have the ability to do it in the setting they were most interested in. So, of course, I love the fact I'm being punctuated by squeaks in the background.
Indeed.
So
they are having a time over
They
here.
are. Dad is running up and down with them because he is the bestest dad.
That is Virgil you are hearing, by the way.
It's Virgil squeaking.
It is Virgil squeaking, because every time Kit brings that ring over to him, Virgil's like, give. And he's spilling the water dish all over the place.
Yeah, that sounds like the boy. So, IP law is the problem. IP law is the limiting factor. They can't just make what they want to make. So because of those limitations, the solution is, well, then we need to make our own setting, because we want to make something fantasy. So they came up with Enchantica. And it wasn't just a case of, well, we'll just make these figures and they'll sort of stand alone and hang in free space and they're just collectible figures. They decided to go all in. And they did actually write a story for these figures to be drawn from. They invented their own world, their own characters. They sketched them out. And we're going to look at some of those sketches and what they became in a little bit. and created a whole setting to allow them to express the creativity that they really wanted to put into the world. Originally, Andrew Bill, the guy behind this, was asked to do, I think it was something like a 24,000 word story, so effectively a short story. Well, he wrote 47,000 words, and that was book one, which is still, not the world's longest book. That is just under this sort of standard 50,000 word novel length that we would, is standard today. He wrote 47,000 words. That was book one. There ended up being 4 books, and they're really, really good. Now, they're obviously not Lord of the Rings. That wasn't their purpose. That wasn't the time and the experience that was being poured into this creative work. What we were getting instead was a more contained world that still had these high fantasy vibes and still had these things that they wanted to sculpt, but that was the ultimate output, was we want to be able to make figures of these characters. So the characters themselves ended up being extremely well presented in the text because they were designed to be a visual thing that you would eventually be able to hold in your hands. So the characters have very vibrant wardrobes, they have bright colors, they have unique silhouettes. You've got sort of classes of characters that are in there that would then be made into the figure. So you've got like your grand dragons, you've got smaller dragons, you've got carrier dragons, you've got the high wizards themselves, and then the sort of wizard lords that rule over Enchantica, and all this sort of stratification that was all designed to allow for figure making to happen, but they wanted to make it believable, and they wanted to make a world where all of that made sense, so that it had meaning to it. Yeah, books made to sell plastic, very much that. And the figures, my mum collected them. She's still got the majority of them. They're in her current house that she lives in now, and I happen to know for a fact that they are bequeathed to me in her will, because these were a sort of bonding thing for me and my mum. So we're going to have a look at some of that. I'm going to explain the setting and sort of, what they came up with to justify selling resin to people. So, first of all, I don't love the name Enchantica. It's really good for marketing, but it's a terrible name for a world, in my opinion. However, it's got a special place in my heart because I have attachment to it. And yes, my mum is a lovely lady. I am very blessed. My mum is not just my mother. She's also one of my best friends. She is a phenomenally cool woman. She got me into so much that I'm into. I speak to her still multiple times a week, despite living 8,000 miles away. And she's met just about all of my friends, and everyone who's ever spent any time with her is like, yeah, your mum's really cool. And I'm like, hell yeah, she is. I love my mum. She's great. Okay, so Enchantica. So the world of Enchantica is dominated by the concept of the seasons and the rotation of seasons. You have 4 great wizards who have tamed the land of Enchantica and made it bountiful by balancing the seasons. This was a very chaotic world before they came along, and using high magic, seasonal magic, they have made the world have a sense of balance that allows for things to live and breed and life to go on in this world. To do that, they use crystals mined from the world itself to power their seasonal magic that keeps the world in balance. Each season, whoever's turn it is, whichever of the 4 wizard lords, leaves their personal kingdom, where it's eternally the season that they represent, and they journey to the center of the land, to somewhere called the Throne Citadel. And they will then rule for the duration of their season at the Throne Citadel, using the crystals that have been gathered there over the preceding 3 seasons to power their magic, for them to have their seasonal length. And then as their crystals run out, so the spring crystals run out, the summer crystal chest is now full, it's time for the spring wizard to leave the seat of power, and the summer wizard then comes in, and then he begins summer for the whole world. Other than in the individual 4 kingdoms, as I've said. So you've got these 4 wizards who are governing the world for each season, and the seasons are about equal in length. The chests that the crystals are gathered in allow for there to be the existence of one particular breed of dragons and also for dwarves. The dwarves mine the crystals, so we've now got sort of the dwarves from Lord of the Rings, except they're now in their own setting, mining these critically important crystals, and they are flown by carrier dragons, which are very slender, pretty dragons. They're very elegant. They are flown to the throne citadel, where these crystals will then be decanted into the appropriate seasonal chests. So you've got 4 giant enchanted chests. Each of these chests is guarded by a grand dragon. This is a dragon that has been magically altered to, 1, be too big to leave the chamber that they're expected to guard these chests in, and 2, to be particularly ferocious. So these are your much bigger Western dragons. These are your Smaugs, but you've got 1 for each season, which obviously would be very fun to sculpt as well. The dragons are always angry all the time. They are angry marines, unless a seasonal witch enters the chamber that they're in and soothes them to sleep, which is what allows the carrier dragons to deliver their crystals and fill the chests. And then once they leave, the dragons are reawakened to guard the chests until the next time that the crystals need to come in. So we currently have a seasonal wizard, a seasonal dragon, a seasonal witch, and we've got seasonal crystals. So we've got very strong theming running through all of this at the moment. Where did I get to? I'm making sure I'm not missing anything because it's been a long time since I read these books. And then, of course, you've got all of the sort of, you've got the court of each wizard that expands beyond that, and then just the general creatures that live out in the world. So you've got seasonal fairies. You've then got your creatures that aren't particularly seasonable and maybe don't even live in one of the kingdoms. And it's from there that we're going to draw our hero character when we talk about him in a moment. So before I go into who our main character is that leads us through the story and what the story of Enchantica is, I want to take a minute to just think about how excellent Andrew Bill was at naming things for this. Now, bear in mind, again, the whole point of this is to sell figures for people to collect at home.
So
Yeah, go on.
I'll make the observation because books made to sell plastic is the thing that Doctor Who commented earlier. Doesn't necessarily equate to a bad thing. Because I point out to the early days of Games Workshop where the books were there to build the world to sell the minis for the hobby's sake, and it was very creatively excellent.
Yeah, and I think that's the sort of dichotomy you get of the 1980s is on the one hand, you've got cartoons to sell plastic to children that, let's be entirely honest, were not that great. They were literally there to be glorified advertisements. But then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got 40K, you've got Enchantica, you've got these people who are trying to make a worthwhile product they want people to love, who are willing to put all of that extra effort in to justify the interest and justify the product. So you've really sort of got these two opposing forces going on in the 80s. I just don't think you'd see today, just because of, how content and creativity is available now. Yeah, G.I. Joe and Transformers, Nature of the Era,
Mighty Max,
Warrior Trilogy to sell miniatures. Yeah, so, you guys are all familiar with this, and this is what was going on in the UK, was Enchantica was being made to be, once again, at the good end of that scale. So I am just blown away by how good Enchantica is for what it was, because let's go through the seasons and let me read you off some names for critical characters that are involved in this story, because these names are phenomenal. So the winter season, the High Wizard of Winter, the Lord of Winter, is the wizard Vrost. Vorst. And that is such a good name for a winter-aligned character. His dragon that guards his chest at the throne citadel is called Grawlfang, which is a fantastic name for a white dragon. And his winter witch who soothes the dragon and helps him with his plans is called Tuatara, named after the lizard. So these are, surprise, surprise, your bad guys. Vrost, Grawlfang, and Tuatara. Then we have the spring set. The spring wizard is called Phantazar, which is just such a vibrant name for somebody who's going to be all green colours, all full of the pep of spring and new beginnings. You've got Phantazar, and his dragon is called Gorgoyle. And Gorgoyle is a boastful and brash and outgoing kind of character, obviously with a good heart. And then his spring witch is called Bruntian. Not Frost, Vrost. But yes, it evokes that word, it's just such a good name. For summer we have the Grand Wizard Oralan, and his dragon is called Arengast, and the Summer Witch is called Vision. In autumn, we have Waxifrade, and his dragon is called Snarlguard, and Snarlguard was always my favourite, because Snarlguard is red. And the Autumn Witch is named Quillian. All of these names are excellent for the seasons they're supposed to represent. It's got such good theming. And again, the bad guy names are just fantastic.
So,
Go on.
because I had to take Saris out for another potty break, did I hear that one of them was called Rost?
Vrost. Vrost.
No, what was the one for... What was it? The dragon for summer?
The dragon for summer is Arengast.
Okay, I misheard then.
Yeah,
It was like, that sounds like the name of the Totally Not Strawberries from Pokemon.
I'm going to pull up the full catalogue of Enchantica stuff because they have got some wonderful names. So you've got these little dragons. Because let's talk about the hero that we follow for a minute before I get into what the actual story is. The hero that you follow through the story is effectively going to be your Bilbo equivalent or your Frodo equivalent without being, without jacking the notes too hard, because this did want to be its own thing, and I do feel like it is its own thing. So the character you're following is a forest bantha named Jonquil. He's a very, very small humanoid, and he lives in the forest where he and his other friends, his community, all live in mushroom houses that grow along with the banths themselves, so that the older you get and the older your house gets, the bigger it gets, the more rooms that you have. And they live in cohesion, a companionship with a very tiny dragon species called snapdragons. And they are very tiny and very cute. And his companion is called Ratterjack, which, again, brilliant name. Ratterjack is very cheeky. He loves to play ball. He's like the beagles. Ratterjack has the personality of one of our beagles. Other names that turn up in the setting, there's another snapdragon called Snapper. There's the dwarves, Tarbet, Hest, Hepner, and Blick. There's other banths. Old Yargle is the grumpy old bard who tells stories from throughout history. Talking of bad guys, there's goblins that get run into. The Goblin King is called Hellbender. His son is called Hobber, and his daughter is called Okra.
I never enjoyed okra growing up. It's definitely bottom of the barrel in the vegetable kingdom.
Fair enough. You've also got the ice troll Ogrod, the summer fairy, winter fairies, all the different fairy types. You've got Celendia, Phosphix. All of these names are really, really good names for fantasy characters when you're talking about high fantasy. And I'm just blown away by the effort that was put into this. And then when they got to the carrier dragons, which are the elegant dragons that carry the crystals, you've got names like Samphire and Furza and Breen. They also have cave-dwelling creatures with huge eyes called Peepers. There are merfolk on this world that at one point get visited. The king and queen are called Olm and Sylphan. So there's a human gladiator in it called Thrace. There is an evil winter dragon and his rider called Wargren and Snowthorn. I just love the names from this setting because they are so tightly themed to what the setting's trying to get across. And that's really, really cool. So what is the setting trying to get across? Well, the story is a very human one, which is probably why it stayed with me. All the stories, how many of these things are there? A lot. There's a lot. So all the stories that I love the most at the end of the day have a very human core to them, core ideals of life experiences that we can all understand even if we've never lived through them. And the story of Enchantica is at its core a very simple one. It's a story of displacement, of not belonging, of finding oneself and the different routes you can go down to do that, and negative and positive connotations to challenging yourself. So the story opens with the winter wizard Vrost, who's always been surrounded by the season of rest and death and cold. He grows incontent with his lot. His brothers have got all of this life, etc., around him. He's in charge of the kingdom of death, and he grows resentful, especially of his brothers' adulation from the other races of the planet. No, a lot of people don't enjoy winter. You can't grow anything in winter. It's very cold. It's very dark. It's not always appreciated. So in some ways, this starts sounding very much like a certain very popular series of My Little Pony that came out in recent years. And it's all built on that same human idea of resentment. And resentment that gets built not necessarily because of your own fault, but your own perception. So he becomes very resentful of his brothers, and he spends his time scheming to eventually overthrow the throne citadel and take full control of the world with no intention of ever giving it up, an eternal winter. He manages to get into the throne citadel. He uses his witch Tuatara to be able to get access to the chests of his brethren and to get those chests stolen away and disposed of around the world. The other dragons then go chasing off to find the chest that they're supposed to find, leaving Growlfang as the only dragon in charge of the throne citadel and only allowing in the carrier dragons that are carrying winter crystals. All of the others are rejected. So he's now got the only power source coming in. He compels the dwarves to only mine his crystals and takes control of the world effectively and puts it into an eternal winter. Now for us, we're following the Banff Jonquil, who lives in the forest, and all of a sudden, it's winter, but winter just isn't ending, and nobody really knows why. But Jonquil's a light-hearted fellow, and he wants to go out adventuring, so he's exploring his local area with his friend Ratterjack. And as they're playing with a vine ball, he ends up... Oh, I see Pupcam's gone down again. Why has Pupcam gone down?
I don't know.
I don't know either. There we go. It's working again. It's not you. It's Discord.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm saying I may need to move the camera because the babies are currently chewing outside of view. But Pip wants in again, so maybe he'll rile them back up.
Go let him in. So... Jonquil and Ratterjack are off playing in the forest when they find a large pond, small lake.
Is there a woman in there distributing swords?
No, it's stranger than that. It's the middle of winter, a winter that just doesn't seem to want to end, and this pond is in summer. It's in full summer bloom. And they don't know why. So they go to investigate. And of course, this is where the summer chest has been discarded. And the guardian dragon, Arengast, is lurking around and trying to figure out how he's going to get the chest back out of the water and find his wizard lord and try to start restoring balance to the world. And that's how our main character gets drawn into things. He doesn't have a wizard turn up and knock on his door with a series of dwarves behind him. He finds a dragon in the forest, and from there he starts to have all of the different adventures that he goes on, and that leads him through all of these different areas of the world that they then drew the figures from. So there's a point where they get captured by the goblins. There's a point where they fight Ogrod, the snow troll. They end up in a cave system at one point where they meet the Peepers. They unite with the other dragons to try and find the remaining missing chests. Eventually, Jonquil and Ratterjack meet, I think it's Phantazar, it could be Oralan, but they meet one of the other high wizards, and it turns out that the Banffs are a race that's sort of indulged by the wizard. And his tribe off in the forest is a lost tribe that nobody knew was there. But the Banffs that live within the High Wizard's Kingdom, once they turn of age, there is a potion they take that's made for them that lets them get wings so they can fly. And during the story, Jonquil gets wings and learns how to fly. And that's a whole thing that goes on in the story. And that, of course, then allows them to solve future problems to eventually bring balance back to the world. It's not the world's deepest setting because it didn't need to be. But to sell figures to people, it's way deeper than it had to be. And I have always had so much respect for just how lighthearted and enjoyable it is. It's a popcorn high fantasy. You don't need to think about it too hard. You just enjoy it for what it is. Here, have a dragon, go do a crime. Yes. The dragon is pretty much a wizard. The dragons in themselves aren't particularly anything overly special. They do all have fire breath. They are very big. They're very fierce. They can snap a man in two with a single swipe of their jaws. But the reason why the pond was in full summer was because of the chest and the discarded summer crystals that had fallen out of it into the bottom of the lake. So the dragon wasn't responsible for that. He was just trying to figure out how the bloody hell he was going to get his chest back. And Jonquil helps, and that's where the adventure starts. So if I pop over to OBS, I can show you a few more things from Enchantica. Let me take down the little opening poem that you got on. Every figure that you brought had a box with that written on the back. But in 1986, it started like this, with some simple sketches. We've got Jonquil on the left, Ratterjack in the middle, and then the picture on the right is from where they'd gotten up to in, I think, 2006, which was when sort of Enchantica wound down. So it started out with some really rough sketches, some very, very 1980s sketches. And the whole point was to make these into sculpts. And these are the sculpts from those particular sketches. Again, Jonquil on the left, Ratterjack in the middle, and then the Winter Dragon on the right. That's not Grulfang. Grulfang looks far cooler than that. I can probably find a picture of him. So this was the end goal, was to make these for people to collect, and they had numbers on the bottom, and some of them are worth quite a lot of money these days, particularly if you had the collector's edition Throne Citadel, which was from the very start of the run. And as time went on, they both refined their concept work, but also their output, because the resin capacity of 1986 is very different from the resin capacity of 2006. And of course, today, if you wanted to make one of these, or you wanted to indulge in this sort of thing, we have the benefit of 3D printing, of Blender, of all of these things that we can do to test things out. Well, they didn't have that. They had sketches and clay, and once you got it right, you then made a mold, and then you made your multiple resins. So it's a very different world that this all grew out of, that I'm really glad I grew up with. And again, I just don't think you'd see this same kind of thing emerge in this way today. On the other hand, what we've got going on today is also really, really cool. And a certain Mr. Parallax of the Black Pants Legion may or may not have spoken to me about possibly making models of some of the shoal stuff that we make when the time is right. Much later on, because he has access to Blender, and we're doing things in the modern way with our access to modern resources, and that's really cool as well. But I did just want to take a little bit of time today to bring this really whimsical niche setting to light, to talk about the creative process and the great things can come from the strangest places. This exists because of IP law. And I'm really glad it exists, because I don't think I'd be quite the same person I am today if it didn't. So this is Enchantica. There are now more people in the world who know about it, and who also know that my mum's a pretty cool person. Right, let's make Enchantica go away. We've done that bit. I've had my Red's rant and wittering. Corbin, we'll have that discussion another time. That's not for the Legion. That is untold power that the Legion shouldn't have. What we need to talk about there is Parallax teaching me to use Blender.
Meanwhile, I would like to make the observation that Pip is currently in the crate with the babies. He's in the crate grumbling at the babies, who are looking in at him, swatting at him. They have cornered their father. I mean, I could move the camera to try and make it.
You want to see if you can move the camera? We've got a couple of minutes before we move over to Shoal, but we're going to have a little bit more time for Shoal this week, which is nice. They do, in
Okay.
fact, seek his lands and titles. Babies, what are you doing? Oh, Dad's coming out. You're in trouble now.
Yep. And one of the babies is trying to ascend Dad.
Must climb Mount Pip. Oh, he's going back in again. This is going to be the game this afternoon, is hide and seek with Dad. So yeah, the puppies are doing great. Right, Shoal. Okay, so I did say that we have Ninja's awesome simulation. Would you guys like to see the coolest, nerdiest thing that's ever been put together ever? It's going to be about 3 minutes, and that will let me have a drink. Let me put this video on. It is here.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a partial simulation of the MERN system. We have the inner planets here doing their thing, orbiting. We have Luastra also doing its thing and orbiting. And we have its mini moons doing their thing and all orbiting as well. How crazy is that? We zoom into Luastra, we can see it has many moons. We can see Mole here doing its best. It's my favorite, to be honest. Let's see. Mole has a tidal stress of 10 to the 12. I saw there for a split second. That's pretty spicy. For reference, Earth is 10 to the 9. So, you know, a bit spicy on the tidal stress. But hey, that's fine. We also have Shoal, a habitable planet that is orbiting Luastra, which is orbiting MERN. Because it is orbiting two different things, there's a couple weird things that happen to this. For one, your surface temperatures rise and fall quite a bit. Mostly because if you look at the energy coming in, it is going to vary depending on how close Shoal is to the sun. Which is also why Shoal orbits out of plane with Luastra. If it orbited perfectly in plane, the temperature swings would be even more extreme than they currently are. That means half the year, Shoal is getting quite warm. Well, relatively speaking. And then for the other half of the year, Shoal gets cold. A more extreme summer and winter than what we would have. We can see, looking up here, that we have liquid water, at least around the equator. The poles, yeah, it's all frozen water, but you have liquid water on the surface around the equator. Speaking of the tides tidal stress magnitude is 10 to the 10 normally. So I have seen it spike up to 10 to the 11 briefly. So that means, on average, there we go, 10 to 11. On average, the tides on Shoal are about an order of magnitude higher than they are on Earth. And for some time, they are 2 orders of magnitude higher than they are on Earth. So, you know, it's probably better to be an aquatic species on Shoal.
And there we go. So we have that modelled. I see some comments have come in while that was happening. Oh God, I'm hearing myself. I need to turn that off. There we go. That's better. So Ninja Turtle did an absolutely amazing job with that. And yes, there were some wiggly lines. When I first saw it, I was just struck by how beautiful the pattern of orbits was. Where's the rant that started at the beginning when I was going on and on and on about a setting that nobody has ever heard of? Nevermore. I've also done other rants that you can find on our VOD channel, and sometimes I even have hot takes. For example, I don't think the story of Mass Effect is that great. But going back to our orbital model, we did in fact have the wiggly lines, and I was just going off at Ninja Turtle when he first showed me about how pretty it all was. And he was explaining, the things that he's just explained to you guys, plus some more. Shoal chasing Luastra in places, yes, and in other places, Luastra is chasing Shoal. It looks like, Shoal is ahead of it, and we took that into account last week with some of our work, where we were looking at how we were going to talk about seasons on the planet. If I go back and find that work, that should be up here. In the seasons, I think was where we put it. Yeah, we talked about having 2 seasonal bands because, of course, a season is defined by significant changes to the planet's current function that's noticeable to a civilization. That's kind of how you put your seasons together in a nameable way. Of course, animals will naturally react to what's going on a planet without needing civilization to tell them that, but that's kind of, how you get your dates defined. So we split the seasons on Shoal into 3 separate bands, the main band of which is the seasonal bands of Presto and Largo. Presto seasonal band is when Shoal is lagging behind Luastra and is therefore pulled faster through its orbit by the immense gravity of its host, so stars in the sky will look like they're moving faster. And then in the Largo seasonal band, when Shoal is ahead of Luastra, its orbit is going to be slowed down by Luastra pulling it back, so the stars in the sky will seem to move slower as a result. So those became our 2 big seasonal bands, and we then fit some others inside of that. Seawater has a high heat capacity, so that also dampened the weather variation, yes, especially as we don't have much land to have to sort of unsettle that. Far less land than on planet Earth. What else did we get? Yeah, my hot take about Mass Effect. 3 could have had a better ending, yes.
I will stand by my statement that 1 was fun and good, and then they fucked it away in 2, and it just went downhill from there. The writing for 2 was garbage. That's my spicy take.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to hear me argue because I have opinions, but I also, as ever,
Opinions?
I know, right? I never begrudge people enjoying the things that they enjoy and that they find pleasure in. Just because one person doesn't like something doesn't mean that you shouldn't like it. So I have hot takes, but that doesn't mean that I want anybody to stop what's... I'm not going to yuck your yum. I personally find it yucky, but if you're happy, carry on. Doctor Who's spicy take is Andromeda is actually pretty good. I actually had that conversation with somebody this weekend just gone, where we were talking about Andromeda. It was taken behind the woodshed too soon. Yeah, it was also brought out of the oven too soon as well, which was a lot of its problem. 1 was the series peak for Mass Effect. Yeah. I mean, I played Mass Effect 1 all the way through until what was going on with the Reapers was revealed, at which point I went, oh, I know this story, I've been here before. And that's not Mass Effect's fault. Start talking about the new Dragon Age game. Everyone seems to hate it. I mean, I can't say too much about it as I haven't played it myself. I was also talking about Dragon Age this weekend, just gone. But for me, the Dragon Age setting, 1 was interesting enough, but I'd list it as good, on the lower end of good, but it wasn't really anything special to me. And I just saw it going down a very tropey route from there on out. And the fact that it's potentially now catering to various audiences in various ways, including changing its art style, there's a lack of integrity there that makes me want to even give it a try to have some concrete opinions about it. So yeah, I don't think I would like the new Dragon Age, but I haven't actually played it, so I don't have concrete opinions. All right, so we were going to do some shoal stuff this week. We are now very much approaching our second hour, so it's time to do some world building of our own and see where we can get to. So we did look at some shallow ocean life last week. I did start writing some of it up, but we knew that we were going to have a plankton-based ecosystem, moving up to krill, plenty of species of crabs. I've started looking into starfish and expanding that. We know we wanted to have some kind of ridiculous mouthed critter that would grind up the coral reefs, that would be some kind of shelled creature. We knew we wanted water jellyfish and turtles that eat them. Somebody came up with the really good idea of kelp fish, really long fish that hang in the water with their mouth where the roots would be on a kelp. They look like kelp, they hide in kelp forests. Very slow feeders, but low energy usage. So that would make them a great thing to have. We talked about having psionic schooling fish that use psionics to detect threats around them and change their school makeup based on that. Because if you're going to have a unusual energy source on a planet, it makes sense to have evolutionary pressure adjust to that. So that was a really good idea that came out. Somebody suggested the squeaker fish, which would be like a puffer fish but moves quickly by rapidly sucking in water and then pushing it out the back like a jet. We talked about having mimic octopi that would mimic the coral. We talked about giant manta rays. And speaking of giant manta rays, we do have a specific channel on the Discord, on the auxiliary Discord, where you folks can talk to me about shoal, talk to each other about shoal, come up with ideas, put things out at me. And we have Tired German in chat, who's been very active over there, as has Ed and some others. And there's been some concept art for things that we might include into shoal, one of which includes the manta ray transport. Giant manta rays with pods on their backs that, people can travel in to get to places quicker or with less hassle. So we definitely know we need manta rays. Yes, what's that?
Talking about that reminds me of another weird setting that would be fun to discuss from a world building standpoint, because that just reminds me of the Silt Striders from Morrowind.
Morrowind has such a unique
Morrowind is
ecosystem.
fascinating.
But if we're going to talk about Morrowind, then at some point we're going to have to talk about the world building in general for Elder Scrolls, at which point we're going to have to talk about when limitations are a bad thing for your creative juices. Cough, cough, using an engine that hasn't been updated in like 20 years at this point. So that would be a very complicated stream. I'd have to do some research for that one. Ed is saying that I should show Tired German's picture on stream. I should.
That sounds like a good idea.
Let me go and grab it because I haven't saved it to somewhere I can easily grab it from at the minute.
The thing about, I would say skip the talk about the Tired engine if we're going to go with the world building of Morrowind, because that really became a thing with Oblivion onward.
That's true. That's true. Morrowind does predate that being a problem and adjusting how people approach things.
And really, the most fascinating and weird parts of the Elder Scrolls are most prominent in Morrowind and earlier. Oblivion and Skyrim are a bit more generic fantasy. Not saying that they're bad, just they're not as weird, which I think is to their detriment, because Morrowind had such bizarre but compelling world building in it as far as just the environments.
I entirely agree. Let me give this a unique name. Yeah, nothing else quite looks like Morrowind. There's a reason why it has such a dedicated fan base. Okay, there we go. You guys should be seeing this awesome piece of art. The Manta Metro. Domesticated in ancient times, the once humble manta ray was domesticated and bred for strength and size as a beast of burden on shoal. Native to the deep oceans, these Leviathan transports can carry up to 321 passengers at a time on their routes, and they have different pod types. Somebody was speculating that these would perhaps be sort of pustules that are genetically introduced to the manta rays that harden as they become older without being of a detriment to the manta rays. We can look at all of that when we get to domesticated species and culture and etc. But isn't this cool?
Oh my god, so it's a marsupial?
Sort of. So yeah, we have some fun over on the Discord to do with Shoal, and I'd love to see you guys over there to have wonderful ideas like this and throw your input in. So we knew we wanted manta rays, and this again, this was tired German, and it is a wonderful, wonderful concept, and this is exactly the sort of thing in the long run that I'd love to have in the illustrated compendium that we'll be looking at building at the end of the year going into 2026, is having this all in a sort of supplement like PDF with illustrations through it of things on the different pages, some writing from the community as well about some of the different creatures and different events that may have happened. I think that'll be a really fun time. Indiana Jones on Zeppelin ideas. Oh no!
Well, the thing about that, though, Quinn, is how do you throw somebody out the window and watch them plummet into the cargo if you're underwater and you just kind of push them out and then they just kind of are still swimming?
Unless it's being chased by some kind of giant marlin spike fish.
That would be terrifying.
Controlled boils, pockets that get made into the flesh of the manta so that our merfolk can put people and stuff in them. Yeah, it's a lot we can play with there, and I do really like this. This is a very, very cool piece of art. Right, let's see. What else did we look at last week? We decided we were going to have mesmer sharks that would disorient prey. We'd have placoderm sharks, siren eels to lure in their prey, a metal and gem excreting molluscoid that moves across the bottom. We mentioned about the lab-grown racer transport, prey fish in huge groups, and a carnivorous fish that also moves in huge groups but looks like the prey species. This was a wonderful idea from fan art that I definitely want to build into this. And as I say, I started writing things up and then life happened, and Shoal unfortunately just didn't get the attention I wanted it to have last week. So that was the sort of thing we were beginning to look at for some shallow ocean creatures. And I know one of the conversations we had was about hippos, and we wanted to do with hippos, and we decided we were not going to have ocean-going hippos, but we were going to have huge hippo communes with their own little ecosystems on their backs in the giant lakes on land, on our land masses. So I thought we might focus over there for a bit this week and see what we come up with. Let's see, what else are you guys saying before I click over? Private transport is something reserved for the elites, and most merfolk either use currents or the metros to get between places. We are not having house hippos. Oh God, think of the children. Right, let me move to... All right. So we knew for the temperate... We've got two large land masses in the equatorial regions that they remain temperate through the year and can have life on them. Grimos's mind is going places, I can see.
Oh no.
Yeah, I do like the idea that mechs isn't just yes, everybody has one, everyone can do this job. No, I do like the idea of mecha pilots being, that little bit more psionically gifted than their counterparts, to be able to interact with the mechs properly, and that, that they're going to take some resources and some commitment to make these things, even though that they're going to be legacy things that pass from generation to generation. It's still a big commitment, and it wouldn't make sense for everybody to have one, but work-based mechs to allow them to mine minerals from the ocean bed will be, that makes sense, and they'll be very, very industrial, very, very pedestrian and functional, all the way up to, maybe the personal mechs of whatever the ruling elite that we decide we're going to have would be like. Perhaps we've even got some mechs that belong to the Shoal Tourism Board, if we're going to bring humans into the mix, or other species coming to visit, where you've got these very elegant jet skis or show-off vehicles that are there purely to literally show off to the neighbours. There's all of these sorts of things that we will get into, but that's going to have to come when we get to culture, which I really do want to start getting into what our races are going to be and what our cultures are going to look like within the next week or two. I'd really like for us to move in that direction when we can. But to do that, we do need to get a little bit more of this foundational stuff down of what the ecosystem is like that we're working with. So, that said, we've got 2 land masses. We know we're going to have huge lakes on them and water life to still be a very significant thing, even on land. What animals do we want to have on the land? We'll worry about the lakes in a minute. Let's start with some land creatures that we want to have. I have a feeling that land would benefit from not necessarily having much in the way of huge fauna, because there's not that much land overall. I feel like a lot of smaller species would make more sense. Toads for log to lick, I think that's very important. Toads that can be licked. Bugs and stuff, crabs, there I said it. Yep.
So I still like the idea of a land whale kind of thing, a maybe amphibious land whale. I mentioned it a couple weeks ago.
I'm trying to remember what the ancient species was. No, it wasn't Sarcosuchus. Ambulocetus? Something like that. But there was an ancient whale, because fish left the water and came onto the land and became these sort of weird, almost dog-like looking things with weirdly thick tails, and then they went, actually no, sod this for a lark, and re-evolved to go back into the water, and now they're whales.
See, what I'm thinking is something that has kind of the shovel face, because one of the big things that we were discussing when we first came up with, the cosmology of it all is the radiation problems faced with life on the surface, yeah? So the idea was something that forms that basically just has a snowplow shovel-like jaw, and it just scoops up. Basically, it's like a krill feeder except on land, and it just kind of guzzles all of it down, and all of the silicates that it's eating gets metabolized into a carapace that allows it to be radiation resistant, while any kind of mineral that it cannot process, basically it's a living refinery that poops out refined precious stones and ore, while basically just scooping up mudworms by the metric buttload and consuming them for its non-silicate sustenance. Yeah, a giant crocodile, Eric, would also work with the consideration of, again,
I think
if
a
we're talking
giant crocodile
extremophiles,
might make more sense, because the ability to sort of trundle around on land and then, oh god, there's a problem, I'm going to hide in the water.
that's why I was saying amphibious. I
Yeah.
use the term land whale mostly from the concept of, how it eats,
Yeah.
rather than being a crocodile that is extremely carnivorous. Oh,
Bless you.
thank you. Rather than being a predominantly, predator, it's a filter feeder that just scoops up all of the mud and silicates.
The very important point has been made that we need a digs. We must, in fact, have a digs.
Oh
Does
my
that
god,
also mean that we need a goat? We need goats.
Titanic tardigrade, it's a water bear. I saw that look on your face.
You know how much I love tardigrades.
Yes, that's because they're amazing.
We do have volcanic land masses, yes. So if you've got ideas specifically for that, let me know. We're not having land megalodons. We can have some of those, but they're staying in the water.
Land megalodons, that's a terrifying thought.
Yes. What else did we come up with in the past? We did talk about having gigapelicans. something very pelican-like that can store stuff in its bill. So I think that's still a good idea, and that we should definitely bring some of those back.
Yeah, the big question really that comes to my mind is how do these things survive on a very not great kind of radiological environment? Floating islands. Okay, Diggs, that's an interesting idea.
How are we going to justify floating islands? What's keeping them up there? I'm not against it, but we've stuck to mostly scientific without going too hard science, so we're not crunching too many numbers.
So I'm just sitting here trying to bite my tongue and not say let's pull a James Cameron and call it unobtainium.
No. The other thing that I'm getting hung up on here, and this is the issue with and why communal writing is so good, is because an individual will sometimes get hung up on stuff. In my magic setting, my personal setting that I write for, Hevner, it has precisely one floating island, and the effort it takes to keep that island up there is not insignificant. Symbiotic land whale? I mean, we don't have to stick it onto the land whale. We could do that with another species all its own. And you know, that explains how maybe some of the larger life forms that stay on the land and aren't amphibious cope, is that they have this symbiotic relationship with radiophytes.
Yeah.
Mineral scales, okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking with the land whale concept, was the mineral scales.
Species.
The islands are lives and animals themselves. I mean, at that point, gonna poke at Subnautica with how they have the reef backs. What if instead of a reef back, you've got something like a giant bull netch? Again, talking Morrowind, where it flies but is a biome all its own, maintaining its own internal gas mix that allows that to happen.
Yeah, well, we could do that. Do we have ship cities? Probably, but we haven't gotten to the point where we're dealing with the sentient races and things they've built yet. But when we get there, I imagine that's going to be there's going to be at least one of the mer races that has a surface ship city of some kind.
Just seems reasonable.
We need very small creatures with enough nerve toxins to kill 2 mammoths at once, and they must be adorable.
Oh, naturally.
I'm down with that.
It's always the cute ones.
We could have giant radiotrophic fungal colonies that produce lighter than air gas sacs to get those sweet, sweet rads.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about having floating jellyfish.
Hover jellies.
Yes. Yes, we are going with mostly just earth air. I feel like we should perhaps have a slightly higher oxygen content, like an earlier version of Earth, because one, that would allow us to have really big bugs, which, why not? But also, we don't have the same oxygen exchange going on due to the amount of land that Earth has that allows for plants to grow that change that. So I'm thinking a higher than average oxygen density. How do you guys feel about that?
That just means you now have the scene set for Crab Mech versus Titanic ant colony. Them crossed with Pacific Rim.
That is a ridiculous thing, and now you have to write it.
Grimo seems to be on board.
Really big bugs.
Oh, there's a pet. I am getting Pip. I'm not going to go into the pen to pet the babies because they are now having their post-play nap.
That's very important. They must be allowed their sleep.
Yep, so here you go, boy. Pip is also having his post-play nap, but he's in arm's reach and isn't moving, even though I'm petting him. other than his eyes turning to look at me like,
Plankton would make a ton of oxygen anyway, yes. And there's not as many places for it to go as on Earth, so...
yep.
Astalos uses the radiation as methamphetamine. I don't think we're going to go quite one full Astalos, but a bird bug, I kind of like that idea.
Think the ornithopters from Dune, except biological. Hypercondensed
Psychic
pearls.
pearl oysters. Oh no!
Ground up, it's a drug. Yeah, no, if you're eating a
Okay,
psychoactive
no, that's really
substance,
interesting. And if you take too much of it, you end up burning out the receptors in your brain and basically permafrost.
and the brain damage.
That's a really, really good idea. Let me come and copy and paste that into the notes section because I need all of that. I can see the story there.
So, Bully Snake, on early Earth, it was oceanic algae that put all the oxygen in the air. Yeah. Shallows could be quite full in the warm season. Seems entirely reasonable.
Right, where are my general notes? They are not on here. I need to find the correct.
How about, Doc, instead of those being important in manufacturing and maintaining the mechs, they are a means by which those who don't have the innate ability to psionically link with the machinery to do so. But it's a narcotic. It's a habit-forming thing. So you're basically saying, I'm going to burn out one day just to be able to pilot a mech that I otherwise physically could not pilot.
There's a Not Safe for Work comic I read many years ago, which has some of the crew members that are involved in space stuff going on there. If you don't have the right vitals to be able to do what they need to do with their fighting ships, and you can't afford to have the genetic treatments to fix it, there's ways that you can take drugs to fake those tests, which comes back to bite one of the characters later on. So, I like that idea. Pearl neural helmet. I don't know that we're going to go quite that far, but those are some great ideas. Those are some very good ideas. Shallow's quite full of algae in the warm season. The other thing that we've got, this was something that Lillian mentioned a couple of streams ago, is we know we're going to have these periods where Shoal passes through the rings of Lua, the debris fields around Luastra, which causes the meteor showers, but also vastly increases the radiation during that time period. And if we have radiophyte algae, they're going to bloom during that. So we would get those huge blooms at that point, and that could also be a thing to do with moving a lot of oxygen into the air and dealing with a lot of the radiation that's going on. Pearls could facilitate an unnatural psionic connection. I like the idea of pearls being used to bypass things. I think we can tell some really interesting stories with that.
Yes, oxygen toxicity is very much a real thing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, Ed Gauss. That's kind of what I had in mind when I was suggesting it.
I really like this idea. Really, really like this idea. See, this is why I absolutely love communal writing. Is I don't think I'd have come up with that idea on my own, even if left with this for weeks with nothing else to do. Communal writing is the best kind of writing. All right. Ramshackle's having a time over there. Definitely making that a Kai problem, especially as I have no idea what you're talking about if you message him. All right, what other things did we come up with when we were first talking about this? We did say that we'd look into egg-eating mammals, but now that we're really concerning ourselves with what radiation on the planet is going to look like, what are eggs going to look like on the planet? I imagine that if you're going to do that, they would be a case of you dig a nest to put the eggs in. We wouldn't have surface nesting. And
No,
the shells would also be different to deal with the fact of, radiation. So you'd be looking at mineral eggshells.
Yeah.
Eggs are going to be tough and buried. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So if we've got egg-eating mammals, they're going to be terrifying.
We're talking something that instead of just having like the one sharp tooth or beak to crack the egg and suck the juice out, they're going to need something like, I don't know, a hydraulic press for a jaw that's just going to crack it down the middle and split it in two.
Yeah.
Basically, eat eggs the way you would open up a animal would open up a coconut.
Yeah. What are those mammals going to look like? All right, let me get this note added because there's some really good notes going on here and I don't want to lose them. There we go. And that was from... There we go. Another one saved.
I'm just thinking overdeveloped jaw muscles and a very hard, rigid frontal snout or jaw to provide the hard, sharp surface that it can use to kind of split the eggs open. Water egg laying as well would be a viable option.
Yes, but that's what we're talking about, water species and not land species or amphibious species that dive to get the water eggs. And we'll deal with amphibious species later.
Yeah, that's what Wilf was suggesting was a land species that laid in water, so a amphibious kind of species.
Yeah.
Or maybe sort of like a beaver in that it finds or creates a hollow under the water that has air in it, and it just swims down under there and has its eggs in a shelter with the water acting as a shield to radiation.
Yeah.
Ooh, Ed Gauss, that's not a bad idea. The kind of caustic acid that would be in that stomach would be terrifying.
There we go. So I'm just trying to make sure I keep on top of some of these other ideas you guys are throwing out because there's a lot of good coming in today. Not that there isn't every week, but this is really cool.
Night Owl's got a valid point. Hard eggs being cracked open by just dropping them from very high up.
Yeah, so we have condors that do that, for realsies.
There have been police reports of cars having their windshields destroyed by eagles dropping turtles on them.
Yes, we know eagles do that with turtles, especially if you've ever read Terry Pratchett.
Yep.
Small Gods is a wonderful book that I highly recommend everybody read.
And Doctor Who's the Chef here is coming up with ideas for lingo dealing with
I've
pearl
just
overdose.
copied that note down, yes.
Yep.
Why not a distendable jaw with the hard beak at the back, like an egg-eating snake? Puncture the shell and drain the yolk, and then just spit it out. That's a good idea. Egg-eating creatures with distendable jaw.
Ninja, you are really fixed on the Valstrax idea.
Back of
Holy crap.
I don't
dude.
know how we're going to give anything on Shoal, its own innate built-in jet engines. I've fought Valstrax and oh god.
It would have to be like a bombardier beetle, except continuous. It basically farts to fly.
So yeah, we could
Night owls
have
recognize small gods.
we could also have some sort of simian equivalent egg predators that have learnt to use rocks as a weapon. So some pretty clever.
Yeah, I mean simian or certain rodent species, because otters, raccoons.
Yes, and we did talk about otters in the past.
Facts. Don't apologize, Doc. That's thinking good. Keep the ideas
pearls
flowing.
were a really good idea for just sort of a passing. Hey, wouldn't psionic clams be hilarious? We've come all this way, and it's wonderful. And Corbin, no. Jesus Christ, dude, you really do live just to be a problem for me personally, don't you? And I love you very much. my problem child, ladies and gentlemen. Gator-like dogs with overdeveloped jaw and skull muscles like a coyote. Working name. Yeah, we'll call them gator coyotes for now, yeah.
Coyotodile.
Yeah. And, maybe they are domesticated by, if we decide that we're going to have at least one species, one of the races has adapted to live on the land or live in the fresh water, maybe they're pets. Nuclear-powered aircraft. Oh, God. Cosmos proposed jet jellyfish on Jupiter's atmosphere. The squeaker fish is inspired by them. Yeah, we definitely know we want to have the floating jellyfish. And they have maybe a jet propulsion panic response. Because there's no point, doing any of the standard in-water things like ink or whatever if you're floating around in the air. Yeah, radiation exposure is not a great thing, especially as if you're flying, you're already receiving more radiation than the average person anyway. So deciding, yes, this thing is also powered by radiation, I probably wouldn't want to fly in that plane either.
I mean, honestly, the radiation coming from the power plant probably wouldn't be that big an issue because they would have shielded the crap out of it, but the weight would have been difficult
which does
to
seem to be
engineer
was what
around.
the problem. But you always have to bear in mind that things are going to break. There's going to be a failure at some point.
Oh, granted,
I don't want to be in that vehicle when that failure happens. There are other ways to fly without needing a nuke.
I work in the aviation
Yeah,
industry, maintaining aircraft. I know just how readily shit likes to go and, do inexplicable malfunctions.
Basara, I didn't know that, and that is at once fascinating and terrifying and confusing. Oh, it was largely unshielded because it was the early 1960s. Of course it was.
Oh, well, that's terrifying.
Okay, so talking of avian species, I do like the idea of having some birds. Some bird species makes sense, but we've got the radiation problem. That said, I need to go and do a quick bit of research. Give me a moment.
This is just leading me to think that we need a bird that's actually a plant, and it's one of the radiotrophs that we're talking about.
How would that work?
I mean, it is possible for plants to be ambulatory and able to move. I mean, just on the simplest side, you've got carnivorous plants, but at this point, you basically have a highly evolved flora whose, and I use this term loosely, feathers are proceeding to metabolize the radiation into energy, allowing it to do its thing.
Okay, well, I'll have a think on that one. So, looking into birds, I went to have a look up at kingfisher feathers, because the reason why kingfishers have those gorgeous iridescent blue feathers on their back is because they have like little microscopic crystals as part of their feather structure. Do we perhaps have birds that have something similar that helps to deal with radiation? Or again, we're looking at bringing minerals into the biological form. And does that mean that we have really colourful and unusual birds?
Iridescent would be a word I would
birds.
use.
How do we feel about that, chat? Radioactive sky tumbleweeds. Those sure were some words of all time. Those were some words put together.
I like it, though. No, I like the idea.
Bats with photosynthesizing algae in the skin so that they can feed from that. Or, radio synthesizing algae, because we know that's going to be a thing.
Yes. Some tropical trees can move a few feet a week by moving their roots. And if we're talking about something that is literally just largely based on gliding on this very dense atmosphere, because that's the other thing. Part of the problem with flight is trying to get the appropriate density of air to move over the airfoil to do the thing. If you've got a heavier or a denser atmosphere, potentially it would be easier to generate sufficient lift.
Okay, so we can have mineral feathers.
Potentially. I mean, if we can find rocks that float, we can probably, bullshit up rocks that can fly.
I mean,
Why
yeah,
not?
I mean, if we want to, we can just bullshit up anything, but it's how close to the, scientific believability scale are we wanting to stick to? And we've been doing fairly good with that so far.
Ambush predator that is largely mirror skinned. Rather than absorbing or blocking the radiation, it reflects it. Lurks in shallows, tide pool regions where at a distance it is mistaken for a mirage or a tide pool. And then when something gets close, nom nom nom.
How's that go?
Nom nom nom.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Dense atmosphere would mean more air resistance. I mean, that's also true.
I can spell honest.
That's a fascinating concept, Wilf.
Same way as some critters that eat poison stored in their extremities, the birds could migrate some of the irradiant parts of themselves to their feathers, giving the
That's an idea
bird
because
yeah.
their circulatory system basically has its own cleanup built in, where the damaged cells of the body are harvested and migrated to the feathers to allow new cell growth to not be messed up. So they would have maybe a shielded inner organ that serves as kind of the genetic library for all cellular structures that it then its immune system fact checks between that organ and what it's seeing, and anything that doesn't pass the sniff check gets brought by the immune system to the feathers.
And now we know why humanity might be so desperate to have a good relationship with and bother to visit Shoal despite how hard it is to get to, because Jesus Christ, that solves cancer.
Yes, it does.
How radioactive are we talking about? Is it a Chernobyl blast zone levels of hot, or a few too many X-rays level of radiation? I would have to speak to Ninja Turtle to get some specifics on that. I think he'd be able to answer that question better than I can, but
he's been in chat. He's
yeah, if he's here and happens to pipe up, we can ask him directly. But I suspect we're going to be looking at more than a few X-ray levels of radiation as an issue. We're talking about quite a lot of radiation here, thanks to the gas giant that we're orbiting.
Yeah, the Van Whatchamadoosit
Van Allen
belt.
belts, yes.
Yes, my understanding is those make for a very spicy surface.
Yes. We have spicy space around Shoal.
Spicy space.
Yes. Okay.
We have spicy air of a very different variety than what that term usually implies.
So some of the sort of animals that we think are the coolest on planet Earth, or that sort of stick out the most, tend to be adapted to various things that might not count for Shoal. For example, I don't think we're going to have a good reason to have a giraffe equivalent.
No, probably not. Though you would be able to have a aquatic equivalent, perhaps with a long protruding, face on a basically a face on a stick from the core body, but that would be for
We'd be borrowing from the Elasmosaurus there, not from the giraffe. Yeah.
Tube feeding and things of that nature.
Yeah. I think we'd end up with a lot of species that are more like badgers. I think we should have some badgers who do in fact eat the fungal mushrooms, yes.
Yeah.
And probably are mortal enemies with a snake. It's not
We're
me, but it
talking,
checks out.
Corbin, high oxygen. I dread
God,
to
he's
think
having
of what
ideas.
He's still trying to do Valstrax, I'm sure.
Yeah.
More like the Loch Ness Monster. Mosasaur, I think, is what that was
No,
based on.
mosasaur's a different thing.
Okay. Plesia, what should...
Yes, plesiosaurs. Like
There you go.
Elasmosaurus, Diplodocus. Well,
There you
Diplodocus
go.
was land-based, but yeah. Would surface species get cancer or radiation sickness? Potentially, yes, if they don't adapt to it. So that's kind of why we're having some of these conversations, is how do they deal with the fact that, oh God, radiation, and Aiden's idea of some animals having an organ that's effectively a genetic repository where the body periodically does a sort of self-check of, does this match? No, then that cell's gone cancerous, and eliminate it at all costs.
It's kind
do
of
have trees of some kind. We were talking about having predominantly fungal forests when we spoke about this last, again because of this radiation issue, because we have fungal species on Earth right now that eat radiation.
Yep. And I mean, the whole thing, Doc, is that just because of the Van Allen belts, anything living on the surface would be considered an extremophile by Earth standards, because the surface of Shoal is an extreme radiation hazard compared to Earth.
I think we need a Komodo dragon equivalent with iridescent scales.
So how do we get mushroom people? Now there's a thought. Again, if plants are capable of evolving to be ambulatory and mobile, why not fungus?
Okay, so looking at some of these, we know that hippos will eat whatever's growing in the lakes. That's fine. Toads will do a similar thing. Crabs will pick over stuff. We've got quite a few species here that... Well, do we have many plant-eating species? We've talked about egg-eating species. We know we've got the floating jellyfish, so that will be something that can be hunted. Birds will have the ability to hunt for fish as well if they want to do that. Ambush predators. We need some herbivores. We
do.
What do we want to do for herbivores?
I have adjusted the puppy cam.
You have. Oh my goodness, they're being adorable.
Yep. Oh, hey, speaking of ninja.
Look at the beans! Look at
those toe beans.
Ninja, if you get the chance, do you have any idea just how bad the radiation levels would be on Shoal from your wonderful model, or does it not give you that information?
And do you have the ability to translate it into a comparison of what a location on Earth equivalent would be?
If you can't find the answer to that, or it's one that's going to be a, can I answer that next week, that's also fine too.
Yeah.
Mice equivalents, I assume we'll get. They're a burrowing small mammal, happy to eat eggs and anything else they come across. So yeah, we can definitely have. We can have mice. We can have moles.
Mud moles. With little flaps over their noses so that they can stop them from sucking down water.
Bunny and hare equivalents. I think that's a good idea.
Not by default, and that's a nightmare simulation. Fair.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was something you'd have access to, and I knew you'd be a better person to ask than just trusting my gut instinct. So that's fine. Thank you for considering the question. There are different types of radiation. X-rays and gamma rays are forms of light. So if you just need something that works like photosynthesis but for non-visible light. Yeah, so if we need to start getting into that nitty-gritty, you're quite right. Jackalope, yes. Yes, I like the idea of something jackalope-ish. What other herbivores do we want to go with? What survives on mushrooms in real life?
I mean, at the point, really, if you're talking about what survives on mushrooms in real life, at this point, you could basically go, what grazes on,
Good news, everybody. Diggs is going to eat mushrooms.
let's say, what can feed on brush and trees.
Yeah, I'm just working through things one at a time. We need some form of ridiculous alien squirrel. We knew we were going to have iron-shelled snails, so they can go in. And then our animals that are adapted to crack open eggs can also crack open the snails, I would imagine.
Yeah.
We're going to need some kind of pig species.
Tired German makes a valid point. Herbivores that are going to be very keenly tied to a more or less nocturnal life cycle
There's
on
no
the
such
basis
thing
of...
as a nocturnal... Shoal doesn't work that way, but they would be attuned to the radiation fluxes.
Well, yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Nocturnal in the sense that whenever the the moon is facing away from the spicy source of the murder light.
Yeah. Okay. Ninja's just thrown a very useful thing my way that I want to save from this chat so that I can look into that more later.
Oh, if it's only beta radiation, that's actually not hard to shield against.
So yeah, that does make a lot of this a lot more viable. I want to put this in over here. Chat's notes. There we go. And then back to here, back to here. Let's scroll some so we can see what we're doing. Okay, where have we gotten to now? Right, let's take a look. Small dog-sized bear badger, hybrid, omnivore, but also diggy hole. Yes.
Actually, you want something that feeds on fungus, pigs.
I put pigs on there already. The
Oh, fair
great
enough.
red beaver boar. With thick hides and the ability to swim, these tusk-and-tooth creatures can grow to be large enough to cause problems, even for the most aggressive of creatures. Let me pull this back up.
That's a terrifying thought.
Great.
A boar that has
Beaver boar.
just enough function in their front feet instead of hooves that they can pick things up and then
Oh god,
build shelters.
they've got opposable thumbs. The problem for Juice mission planners is that heading to Jupiter's icy moons means passing through the radiation belts as well. Europa is the closest orbiting of the 3 Galilean moons to be visited by Juice. Any human astronaut that lands there would receive a lethal dose on a timescale of hours, and spacecraft electronics are almost as susceptible to radiation as human biology. Yeah, so it's going to make getting to Shoal a challenge, but apparently one that would be worth it if you can just, cure cancer.
Ram buns. Oh my god. Instead of a goat, we have a bunny that head bonks things.
And they roll like the sheep in Elden Ring.
Yes! Send it! So their headbutt attack is like the spinning hammer leap attack from Monster Hunter. You just go whee and cartwheel until you go head bonk.
We need a water koala that has refused to evolve and stubbornly continues to survive via pure derp.
Isn't that more a water panda?
How many little column A, little column B?
You've got an animal that's just too dumb to procreate?
Oh, excuse me.
If land animal had enough water. Actually, brings up a valid point then. What about animals that are using, instead of silicates and minerals to shield from the radiation, instead thick blubber layers?
Yeah, creatures with thick blubber would make a lot of sense.
Very water-rich, water-dense blubber tissue that acts as a radiation sink.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ed. That was a very helpful quote you dropped.
Yeah.
Aquatic mousetrack, the wings can have arrays of sclerates that function in repeating wave to produce the same effect as a mantis shrimp punch to repel it through the water. That's just terrifying.
So it propels itself by cavitation?
I mean, there's a little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little column A, little column B. You have many little col
I still like Bully Snake's ram buns idea.
Ram buns are on the
Rolling,
list. Ram
yeah,
buns are on the
rolling bunny
list.
goats. Rolling bunny goats.
Okay. So, if we're really going to push the idea of having a Valstrax on Shoal and it's going to be in the water, do we want this to be one of our Leviathans?
I mean,
It
if I'm
travels
not
by cavitation is that would make for a terrifying horror story, especially if it lives in the abyssal depths. You just hear it.
yes, you would. To the point where it would do, bad to your, sensitive squish membranes. That said, aren't mantas a more or less living jet? Don't they propel themselves similarly?
Yeah, but what do you mean by jet? There's a lot of species that use jets of water to move, but if you're talking about Valstrax, the jet dragon, you're talking about a completely different kind
Well,
of
no, I'm
jet.
talking about intake on the front, output on the rear, rather than like say the squid that sucks it in and blows it out the same orifice.
Okay, give me this. Let me copy this onto here so I don't lose this note. Okay, and then back to...
Mantas are flappy boys. Okay.
That's right, they are flappy boys.
I am not a sea critterologist, so
So, speaking of other leviathans, we did know that we wanted to have a hermit crab that lived in a mech. And has probably gotten bigger than the average hermit crab as a result, especially once it fuses with the mech's coral circuitry and oh god, that's going to be a time too. All right, we were looking at land species today. Let's go back up there. All right, how are we doing, chat?
So
What have you guys
Corbin,
got
it
to
sounds
say?
like you're describing the. Now I'm gonna have to go back and watch Hunt for the Red October and see if you're describing the way they described the sub moving in that was like the special propulsion type.
Oh, Castus had a really good idea. Rapid molting creatures that move the radiation and problems and tumors into their outer layers and then just shed them.
Yeah.
That's a very, very good idea.
All right, let's take a look here because now you got me curious.
Let's see, what else have we got? Yeah, napping puppies. We do, in fact, have napping puppies.
Yeah, the puppy cam was set up to look at their enclosure, but they had retired for nap, so it was just showing an empty part of our living room. So I'm like, nobody wants to see our living room. They want to see our puppies. And now you can see their adorable little toe bean.
The floating jellyfish would be a shedding species. I don't have an issue with that. That's a very interesting idea. Potentially gives us something that might be, a useful resources. What can you do with those shed shells? If that's how they come off, we'll have to have a think about that. Do we harvest the cancer fruit they shed? Possibly we do. If you find a video of a shrimp swimming with its little swimmerettes under the tail, moving front to back in repetition, then that's the idea. Yes, yeah.
Oh, there. Okay. So, looking it up, magnetohydrodynamic drive is basically no moving parts, electrically conductive propellant, and the fluid is, fired out as exhaust to propel forward. Low electrical conductivity of seawater is the limiting factor for marine prototypes. Basically, if you could if the thing could heat the water and generate the sufficient electrical fields to propel it, then it could do it that way, which would explain the cavitation because it is superheating the water biologically to allow it to basically ramjet its way through the sea. Why am I even courting this idea. We're talking about making a jet dragon underwater.
Yeah,
You know
we
what?
are.
Whatever. Yes, eye badger. That's what I'm talking about. Uh, Corbin and Ninja were trying to figure out how to make Valstrax from Monster Hunter except underwater, and what Corbin came up with reminded me of Hunt for the Red October.
And it would be a great thing if this is a Leviathan that exists because of messing around with biology that went wrong. This thing shouldn't be a natural Leviathan.
Yeah, basically the thing is, so it would be very hungry all the time.
Yeah,
because
which
it's
is why
effectively
I don't think it would
superheating everything.
Why would you naturally evolve this way? You wouldn't. But if
It de-
people monkeyed with things, you would.
I mean, it depends on how rife the feeding grounds are that it could keep up the calorific value. It would basically be a apex predator
I,
that
I think I'd like to stick with natural apex predators being a little bit more in the realms of normal plausibility. I don't have an issue with this thing existing, but I think considering we're looking at maybe doing bioengineering on planet,
yeah.
plus 90, well, some percent of this idea came out of Corbyn's head.
You're not wrong.
And Ninja is also, oh god. So between the two of them,
But yeah,
they are responsible for this nonsense. And probably will lend somewhat of their names to whoever did this.
It basically would have an internal chamber that that has basically a buttload of mantis shrimp punchy limbs, flash heating the water that it then squeezes out the back end to fire it forward.
Ed, I'm not saying all Leviathans are unnatural. Just, I definitely think that this one would be unnatural. And of course, the hermit crab mech would be unnatural because it ended up finding a house where it really shouldn't have. But I would like us to have, I would like us to have some natural, really big.
I mean, the manta bus. The manta bus would qualify as a Leviathan, and that thing, I mean, to be big enough to carry cargo and people.
Yeah, but I'm not really defining Leviathan by size. I'm defining it by importance.
Fair enough.
Because
basically ass plasma.
Yeah, because otherwise,
Yes.
Shoal's covered in Leviathans to the point where the word doesn't mean anything anymore because you've got these huge oceans with a lot of huge creatures living in them. All right.
Numerous Leviathan-class life forms detected ahead. Are you sure whatever you're doing is worth it?
No, thank you, Subnautica. You missed last week. I talked about Subnautica all last week.
So you realize at some point you're going to have to do a Subnautica playthrough on stream. Like, if you hit a point where you're just needing a break from writing discussion, that's what you're going to have to do.
Yeah, we could do a Subnautica playthrough.
Especially when 2 comes out.
And you know what I'm like with Subnautica, though. There is a correct way to play it. And I get very annoyed if it's not being played correctly.
Oh, I know. I remember you quietly just grumbling
raging at you while you were playing with Mum. Yeah.
Yes. Or when I had Whacker on for the one-off Subnautica stream.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're doing it wrong. Stop it. Stop doing it wrong.
Watery giant ass blasters. I get that reference.
All right, we've only got a few minutes left. What other life forms do we want to generate this week before I go away and actually try to make sure I do all of this writing this week? What is the wrong way to play? Bumbling about not paying any attention to what the game is telling you and building underwater witch towers. Those are the wrong ways to play.
Being inefficient.
Being inefficient is also incorrect. You must do things correctly. Eins, zwei. Eins, zwei.
So Eric has a idea actually for the origins of this, nightmare creature that Ninja and Corbin are pushing us towards.
What are those ideas?
Base species was a larger ambush predator using the supercavitation as a short-range, high-speed, ambush attack for prey. And then, whoever it is that proceeded to monkey around with this thing's genetic code are like, what if this, but longer duration? Dragon? expand question, Doctor Who?
Dragon? Like just the one dragon? Or we could have a dragon. We could have a dragon. Uh, can I come back to you next week on concepts for a dragon? Because I have a wonderful book behind me that I would like to pull out and have a look at stuff from that. It's called The Book of Dragons. And I picked it up when I was, once again, a young redling because I really liked the art. And it has sort of classifications of dragons inside it, and the water dragon variant that they detailed. Well, not only is the art beautiful, but they had some really interesting ideas about its environment and ecology. And we might influence ourselves heavily from that. So I will pull that out for next week.
Ed Gauss has a cool idea, and I will observe. So, the prey animal that defends itself by psionically making targets high, a weedfish, if you will. I mean, so that's just kind of the natural progression, if you will, of a very common defense mechanism in nature, which is you might eat me, and I won't kill you if you do it, but I'm going to incapacitate you to the point where you're going to get eaten in turn. So, piss off. If we've got a environment that has a lot of psychoactive and psionically active materials and organisms, then that makes perfect sense.
Bongfish.
The bongfish.
The Monster Hunter world boss with the weird eyes, that would be Shamalama Ding Dong. That would be Shara Ishvalda, the rock dragon that then drops them all and kamehamehas you in the face. We fought it 2 weeks ago on stream.
Yes. Dolphins do get high. They play puff pass if you forgive the pun. The no-kill eye rock from Star Trek. I mean, at that point, the Horta, you're basically just looking at a terrestrial creature that is using the ideas we had for a silicate-scaled skin or hide. That's really what you're talking about. Admittedly, if I remember the episode of Star Trek correctly, I can't remember if it was acid or if it was heat they used to bore through the rock to form all of those tunnels. But honestly, actually, there you go. Starfish-style organism that can basically, A, look like it's made of pebbles, rocks, and boulders, depending on size, and B, externally digest and slurp up whatever it scuttles over. Polytrinic acid. Yeah, there you go. So effectively feeds by scuttling over something and then just, barfing acid all over it, whatever it's sat on top of, externally digesting it, and then sucking up the soup that it makes. Same acid can be used for boring into the land to form a nest for eggs or other shelter. This being an extreme example of the silicate-based radiation defense that we were talking about a little while ago.
There we go. I have written that down. Right. Any last thoughts coming in from chat? Acid strong produces heat. I also love that by due to having polar ice, this planet is technically in an ice age. Yes, just, for forever, because we decided that we were going to go with the world's weirdest orbit and most complicated way of, well, no, not most complicated, but really complicated way of doing this. I'm still absolutely blown away at Ninja Turtle managing to get all of this working in a simulation and then just being like, here, look how beautiful this is, and it all makes sense and it works and it does what you want to, despite the fact that, there's no hard science behind this. I've made it work because he's pretty special. Where did we land on my sea kangaroo idea from the last time I was here? I think we ran screaming from it. We might be able to do you a freshwater kangadile of some kind, though. I might be willing to entertain a freshwater kangadile. Yes.
A kangadile? Oh my... Ah.
Here we go. I'll even write it as the only thing that's currently on that page. Kangadile. There you go. Don't say I never gave you anything. Oh, what did we have instead of drop bears? We did have something where we made the joke that this is what Shoal had instead of drop bears. Was it the drop jellyfish?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, here's an idea.
I am getting kisses from Saris.
Instead of a drop bear, instead of the death from above, that is the drop bear, something that does a rapid death from below by just kind of inflating and falling pointy ends first up at you when you swim by.
Okay, as an underwater thing. Yeah, we'll have to think about that. There was one land thing that we didn't touch on that I think we are unfortunately kind of going to need. That would make a lot of sense.
Droptopus.
We're going to have giant spiders.
Yes.
And I'm going to hate it.
Again, crab mech versus giant bug. You've got a excellent schlock sci-fi film from like the 50s right there. Like, holy crap, this setting lends itself so flawlessly to a 1950s sci-fi flick.
Doctor Who, we haven't permanently settled on that, but I have a feeling that some sort of near space travel at the very least is going to be a part of this, and potentially other life forms visiting. But Shoal is going to be pretty difficult to get to, so we're definitely going to have to think about that when we get into the sentient species section. Imagine a megalodon doing those huge air launches that some of the smaller sharks do. Well, I mean, great white sharks do the explosive breaching, so I'm fine with megalodons breaching, and that would be a sight to see. That would be a sight to see.
Yeah.
Breach hunting for that kind of shark is what they're built for.
Terrifying.
James P. Hogan had a planet in a figure-8 orbit around 2 stars as part of the background fluff of the Giants trilogy, Inherit the Stars, etc., that the aliens were studying, where the creatures evolved from aquatic form to land form and back as the oceans evaporated, and only was livable in mountaintops in the hotter part of the cycle, reverting to an ocean world at the cooler parts. Oh, my brain is trying to dribble out my ears, just trying to keep track of all of that. I don't know how people who do those kinds of settings cope. It's very cool that they do. I'm not calling it a bad thing. I'm just very aware that my brain can't handle that.
Diving bell spiders.
That's a really good idea, and I hate it.
Aren't there actually spiders that form underwater?
Yes, but this is going to be like way worse.
Yeah, no, the diving bell spider is real. Okay, that's terrifying.
Oh god, I hate it. I hate it. With all the magnetic fields from the gas giant, a skyhook would work great. Yeah, there is that.
The diving bell spider will be a terrifying thing for the explorers into the shallows to have encountered during the earliest attempts at land exploration.
Yep. Oh, excuse me. Once again, sleep deprived. You can do a lot with silk strands. Yes, yeah. Silk as a resource is something that I think, would be a necessity, and culturally that could make for really differentiating the land colonies on Shoal.
Carcinization, but with spiders.
Almost evolved a spider. Oh no.
I mean, if you think about it, really, all a spider is the crab of the land.
Yeah, although crabs are also on the land.
Well, yeah, but crabs typically are more...
I just want to see more crabs fighting spiders, because, oh god.
Again, mecha crab versus giant spider. 1950s called, they love it. Film rights approved.
Your inner 12-year-old came up with a stupid and puerile idea. Well, what do you think the rest of us have been doing for the last 2 hours? Hey, Pip. Okay, well, both of the babies are now whining at me.
So, Eric, I'm going to make the comment that spiders do that in the real world except to fly. There's no reason why the equivalent couldn't be done to catch currents to migrate.
Ninja's just very excited about the fact that we have, in fact, got the underwater jet dragon.
Indeed. Oh, Sarah's looking up
Can
at
you see the boy?
Yes.
I'm currently being told by the beagles that, Mother, you must end the stream. Mother, it is time. Mother, it is gone 5 p.m. Why are you not ending the stream, Mother?
I was going to say, it is about that time, isn't
it is, and we have to make sure that we're out of here by 15:15 at the latest, because otherwise we risk the big boss man trying to send us to the cargo mines. And I don't want to go to the cargo mines.
Indeed. That sounds unpleasant.
Yes. Yes. So...
Kite surfing spiders.
Oh, thank
Everybody's
you.
going surfing. Surfing with 8 legs.
Oh, God, I hate you. I hate you all. I also love you all because we've had some wonderful ideas today. I'm particularly happy with the Pearl idea. So is Ceres. Ceres really likes the Pearl idea. Good job, team. Thank you for listening to me witter on about Enchantica so that a few more people are aware of it. Thank you for all the ideas you've thrown in. If you have more, if you want to discuss any of this, we do have a channel over in the Orcs specifically dedicated to Shoal. Once I get all this stuff written up, which I'm determined to do, and hang anything else that comes along, there will be the resources over in the Orcs will be updated, so you can keep up to date with where we've gotten to, everything you guys have helped to build so far. And then next week, we might have a Parallax joining us. He has some things that he might want to come along and have a little chitter-chatter about. Ooh. And if not, I'm sure I will draw something else out of my vault of weird writing things to jabber on about, and then we'll do some more world building. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with me. We're heading into the weekend, so I hope you will all have a lovely weekend, plenty of time to relax. To the best of my knowledge, Tex and Depp will be along a little bit later on with whatever they're up to this evening, and I hope you have a great time. Anything you want to say, Aiden? And then we will get out of here.
No, I think you about summed it all up. It has been a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me, love.
Absolutely. Always nice to have somebody to witter on with and to catch things in chat I might have missed. Oh, have a great weekend, chat. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing us to spend your time with. Drink something nice, eat something nice, and be good to each other.
And remember, surfing spiders.